Alright, ladies and gents, since I'm still laid up and can't get on the water, figured I'd do a video on how I troll for trout at Big Bear Lake. See if I can go over everything that I've learned, any tricks I know, and let's go get it. Alright, figure we'll start off with the boat. This is the namesake of the channel. This is the Sea Spanker. It's a 17.5 foot open bow sea swirl. It's got a V6 engine in it. Decent amount of power. It's a good average boat. Use it mostly for fishing. Do a little skiing and tubing with the family from time to time, but mostly fishing. But biggest thing I wanted to show you is back here. Most questions is how I keep my boat from going too fast, because idle speed on this boat, if you just put it in gear, is about 3 miles an hour, and sometimes that's a little bit fast for trolling. So what I have is I have one of these trolling plates back here. This is what you call an easy troll. You can get them on Amazon. It's got a cavitation plate, and it's spring loaded. So when you want to troll, you drop this plate down, and this puts resistance on the motor and keeps your speed down. So like if it's just in gear with this plate down, it's about 1 mile an hour, which is about almost drifting speed. So when you want to go, you just pull this tab back, flip this up, and you're off and running full speed. So these are really convenient. I've also seen guys, if they don't have one of these, they'll use buckets from Home Depot, drill some holes in it, put one on each side with some ropes, and that usually puts up enough drag to slow you down as well. So if you don't have one of these, there's certainly other ways to do it, or even a drift sock. One of those big nylon drift socks, those could work too, just to slow the boat down. But for the most part, if you don't have an actual electric trolling motor, your gas engine is usually going to put you up probably around 3 miles an hour, and it's probably usually a little bit too fast sometimes it isn't, but you want to have something that gives you a lot of options with your speed, because sometimes they want a much slower presentation than what you can do if you don't have one of these trolling plates or a trolling motor. On the boat, I'm running 2 electric downriggers. I run Canon Magnum 10 STXs. They're great downriggers. I've also worked with the Scotty downriggers. I like Scotty ones too. I guess it just comes down to personal preference as far as which one you're going to put on your boat. I just chose the Canon. They seem to be fine, but I like the Scotty downriggers as well. As for my fish finder, I use a Dragonfly, or a Ray Marine Dragonfly Pro 7. Great fish finder for the money. I didn't want to drop a whole bunch of cash on a fish finder. I'll try and put a picture of it up there, but those that watch my videos, I'm sure you've seen it quite a bit. But so far so good. It seems to be a great little fish finder, and where it says the fish are, usually that's where they are. So can't really complain about that one. It was a good fish finder for the price. And I'm not too tech savvy, so honestly, I'm still learning how to use all the features on it. I just use a lot of the standard settings it comes with, but I know there's more to it, and I can fine tune it, especially to a lake like Big Bear that's a little more shallow than some other lakes. So I still look up some stuff and learn a little bits and pieces here and there. If you have any questions on that, I'll be happy to answer them. But as far as our cannonball weights, I usually go with these heavier 10-pound weights when I'm at Big Bear. You can use a lighter weight. Like I said, Big Bear Lake is not very deep. I mean, most of the time I'm fishing down at the west end by the dam. Deepest water I'm in is about 30 feet. It's not really very deep except right by the dam. And you can't get there in the boat anyway. But these 10-pound weights are good. They give you a true troll depth without much blowback. When you start using some of these lighter weights, sometimes you get a little bit of blowback. So the downrigger says you're at 10 feet, you might actually be at 8. But you know, a lot of people, that's not that important. It's not going to ruin your day, but I just like to know where I'm at. For clips, release clips, I use these Scotty small clips, especially for the trout. They're easy to get the line in, especially when I'm by myself running 2 rods. It can get hectic trying to work 2 downriggers when you're alone. But these clips work great. They're fast and strong enough to hold the bait down there, and light enough even sometimes you get small trout. Usually they can pull it out. Sometimes they can't, but usually they can. Now, when I'm at Lake Tahoe, this is a 12-pound cannonball because we're fishing 200, sometimes even 300 feet of water. So you need something to get way, way, way down there in a hurry. And then I use these cannon releases. These are a lot more stout. You can't use these Scotty ones when you get down deep, because the pressure and everything, usually it'll pop it. But these cannon ones work good when you're running real deep water. But the only time I'll ever use these is out at Lake Tahoe. Oh, and one thing very, very important when you're using downriggers or lead core, and you're using a fish finder, always put your lure right above where the fish are getting marked at. You don't want to run it right through the middle of them, because usually that's going to scatter them and they're going to come back around. By the time they come back around, your lure's already passed through. So I like to think of it as you watch Shark Week. When the sharks attack the seals, they always attack from underneath. And that's the same way all fish do. So when they see something, they're always looking up. They're not looking down. So if they're at 10 feet, I like to put the lures at about 8 feet. So they got something to look up at, and they have the predatory element of surprise. And you usually get more hits that way. All right, on to rods and reels. These two are my main rods I use at Big Bear when I'm trolling. They're both Okuma setups. These are the cold water line counter reels. These are absolutely awesome reels for the money. I think they're about $100 each, but they are just outstanding. I can't say enough about them. They're the feel of them, they're ultra smooth. The drag's good. I mean, I love these reels. Rods, again, Okuma. These are Celio ultralight bait casting rods, and I believe they're about 8 feet long. Again, great rods for the money. I think the rods are like $50. Really reasonable, and great rods for trolling for rainbows. As far as line, I got 20-pound braid on here, and then I run that to 8-pound fluorocarbon using an Albright knot. I'm not going to show how to tie the knot, but if you just type in Albright knot, or you can try uni knots on YouTube, there's plenty of how-tos, and those knots are outstanding for attaching braid to fluoro. And as far as the leader, the fluorocarbon, I usually put about 30 feet out in front of this, and then attach whatever I'm going to be fishing with. And that's usually sufficient. If the fish are finicky, I may go down to 6-pound, but never lower than that. But usually 8-pound is plenty sufficient, and I get plenty of bites. These reels, Kuma, once again, these are called Magda Pros line counter reels. These are even more reasonable. These are only about $50. Again, really good reels for the money. And again, rods are Akuma Celios, but these are medium action rods, and they are about 8'6", almost 9 feet long. I usually run a little bit heavier line on these. I think I got about 30-pound braid and 10-pound fluoro. These I use usually when I'm swinging for the fences. I'm pulling some big crankbait, or big plugs, just for fun, to see if I can get one of the monster trout to jump on it. So far I haven't had any luck, but I'll always, when I'm out there, I'll usually at least try and see if I can make a miracle happen. All right, moving on to lead core line and some mechanical divers here. Lead core is great if you don't have a downrigger. I used lead core very successfully for a long time. Years ago I used to use it out at Irvine Lake, when I could still take my boat out there, and I had a lot of success out at Big Bear as well. I use 18-pound lead core. This brand is Suffix. Fine brand. I don't have any problem with the line. For those of you that don't know what lead core is, it's actually lead. I don't know if you can see in there with the camera, but there's solid lead all the way through there, and it's sheathed with braid, and it's colored about every 10 yards. There's a different color, and what it's supposed to do when you let out a color, that's supposed to represent roughly 5 feet of depth or 5 feet of sink. So at a lake like Big Bear, I mean, you're usually fishing or trolling in about 5 to 15 feet of water. Usually not much deeper than that. At least I don't have much success going deeper than that. So you're usually looking at about 2 to 3 colors of line. So you'll see that in fishing reports. They'll say, oh, the trout are hitting at 2 colors. That means roughly about 10 feet. So if you don't have downriggers or the divers, I highly recommend giving this line a try. And it spools up real nice. Like I got this Magda Pro reel spooled up already. And same thing as the braid. You just spool up the lead core, and then you do a Albright knot and tie on your fluorocarbon from there, and you're fishing. So I can't complain. Still works. A lot of the guides out there don't even use downriggers. They all use lead core. So it still works great. And then over here, these dudes, these mechanical divers, work real good too. They're plastic. You can get metal ones too. A lot of different companies make it. I am not sure who made these. Looks like Davis out of Hayward. But I've used all these for years. What these do is there's corresponding numbers that go with all those holes right there. And you have a guide here that will tell you if you want to go 5 feet, attach your main line to A and your leader line to 1. And that'll take it 5 feet underwater. And so on all the way down to, God, it looks like 80 feet if you let out 120 feet of line. So I've used these at Big Bear and Irvine very successfully. They work great too. Even when you hook up, this doesn't put a lot of drag on the line in my experience, so it's not going to feel like you're hauling up a bucket and you can't feel the fish fighting. Usually with the fish pulling, it causes it to tilt up, so it reduces a lot of the drag. So I have not had any issue with these, and these are outstanding. They're very inexpensive too. Okay, taking a look at lures. These are a lot of the lures I have the best luck with at Big Bear. Starting over here with our Rapellas. I'm not sure the actual model number of these size, but you can see by the size of my hands is some of the smallest ones. But these are the colors I usually do best with. Also, there's a black and silver, similar to this, instead of pink and silver, that work real good. With the Rapallas, I usually don't put them on the downrigger. I usually just let them dive on their own and see if I can get something closer to the surface, because they'll usually only, you let out a bunch of line, you're only looking at about 5 feet. So I try to keep them in that zone just to see if trout are lurking in the shallower water, kind of see what happens. These needlefish here really have the most success with these needlefish out at Big Bear. They work really, really well. And if you watch the videos, these are the bad boys right here. These are red dot frog. This, I believe, is a size 2, and that's a size 3. Usually use size 3. I have size 1, 2 somewhere, but red dot frog, for whatever reason, they love these things. They also like pearl bikini too, real good. But I've caught them on all these. And then we also have these Thomas Buoyants and some basic spoons. I usually use these when I'm running lake trolls, but I'll show you lake trolls a little bit later in the video. But these right here are pretty much my go-to when I'm trolling Big Bear. I got some combination of this. I may have a Dodger in these, may have a lake troll in these, but it's usually something in this group that's bringing the fish in. And one thing that's really important is speed, as I mentioned before, with the trolling plate and the boat and all that. With the Rapallas, It all depends. You know, I kind of do a feel with that. I kind of look at how the action of the lure is while I'm driving at various speeds, and let them out. The Thomas Buoyants, the needlefish, usually 1 to 2 miles an hour is usually somewhere in there is usually where you're going to find the sweet spot. A lot of times I'm going much slower with these spoons or these Thomas Buoyants if I'm using a lake troll. Lake trolls, you can't really take them up to speed because you want more of a pulsating action. But yeah, the speed is hugely important. You always want to put your lure in the water, even at desired speeds, and make sure it's operating correctly, it looks good, all that kind of stuff. So be real mindful of your speed. Now on to lake trolls. As you can see, they come in several different sizes. You got your little bitties, and then these big dogs up here, and then some of these littler flashlights over here. But lake trolls are fun to use. I guess they simulate a school of fish or fish that are in distress. As these things move in the water, they flash, and they also send off pulse or vibration, which in theory attracts the fish. Now, the biggest mistake I think people make when they're using these lake trolls is they troll them too fast, to where they're spinning really fast, and they see them in the water and they see a lot of flash, but you're not getting that pulse or vibration like you would if it was just a little bit slower. So what you want to do is, the best speed usually is a little bit on the slower side, usually not much more than 1.5 miles an hour. But you want to watch your rod tip, and your rod tip is going to just have a nice even pulse. It's just going to thud, 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 like slightly pulsating. And that's how you know you're usually doing the right speed. Usually I use these smaller ones if the water's clear. If the water's getting murky, like later on in the summer, if Big Bear starts to purge, the water starts getting a little bit greener, and there's a lot of weeds in the water, I might go to these bigger fender setups to get a little bit more flash and a little bit more vibration in the water. So if the fish can't see quite as well, maybe they'll follow the noise and get closer to my lures. As far as leader length on the back end of this, usually 12 to 18 inches. It just depends. Sometimes the fish are real curious and they want to get right up on the lake troll. Sometimes they're not, and it's just going to get them in the area, and then eventually they're going to see whatever your bait you're dragging behind. Lots of times I like to use these little dudes. These are wiggle hoochies. As you can see, it has its own bill on it, kind of like a Rapala, so it does its own swimming. So I will give this, a good, 18 inches, maybe 20 inches a leader, because it kind of does its own thing, and I don't want it interfering with the action of the lake troll. Now, up here, we have these. These are made by Shasta Tackle, and they're plastic. These are called flashlight trolls, and they're extra, extra light. And what that means is you can run these at almost 0 miles an hour. I mean, just barely moving, and these things will rotate. These are excellent for drift fishing. In the afternoon, out by the dam, when the wind picks up, you can take one of these, throw on about a 12-inch leader, throw on just a little egg sinker, and throw on bait. Power bait, night crawler, mice tail, whatever, and just drift. And send this out about 30-40 yards, and just wait. And usually the trout you'll get some bites, especially if the trout aren't biting on the troll as good as they do. That's always an excellent alternative. You can also use these trolls too. These are a little bit heavier, so you don't need to use weight with them. Same setup, and just give it out 30-40 feet wherever you think the fish are, and experiment. Put one at 30, one at 40, one at 60, and it's a good alternative, especially if the fish aren't biting on the troll. All right, these are some of my favorite things to use next to the needlefish, but you can also use them with needlefish. These are all Dodgers. Over here, these are your standard Dodgers. these oval deals. Basically what they do is when you pull them behind your boat, they basically move in the water side to side like this, like almost like a fish swimming. And this does two things, just like the lake trolls. They put a flash and then they add vibration. But like this solid red one, not a lot of flash, but more vibration. And then what you do is you get one of these gulp minnows or a lure. You can use a needlefish. You can even use a real tiny plug. Any kind of minnow imitator, and about 12 to 14 inches a leader. And I use I tie a leader loop in it, and I use a baiting needle, and I will thread these directly on to the line with about a number 12 treble hook, and put it behind these dodgers, and put these up to 1.5 miles an hour. And basically the dodger swims, and that in turn back behind makes the artificial minnow swim. And that can be absolutely dynamite. Even better, these are called sling blade dodgers. They're made by Shasta Tackle up north, and these things are the same action basically as a regular dodger, but the way they're shaped, you control them at higher speeds if you want. So you can get up to 2, even 3.5 miles an hour, they say. Same exact principle, same bait, same leaders, all that. But you can bend them, put a little bit more arc in them, and get even more action out of them, or you can leave them flat so you can go faster. Obviously, if you bend them, you want to go a little bit slower. But these things are outstanding for trout, especially if you're trolling your regular stuff and it's not working. I'll always throw these out during the day, and usually throughout the day I'll get 2 or 3 on them, and then switch back to needlefish or another traditional lure, and pick the bike back up. So it's a good, sometimes when the trout take a break, they're just looking for something different, I'll throw one of these bad boys at them, and they work outstanding. Really love them. Also, you can put wiggle hoochies. These wiggle hoochies, like I showed you a little bit earlier, these deals just work great. Same thing, different colors, everything else. Just like your lures, your jigs, you always want to change your colors, but they work outstanding. All right, well that about sums it up. Hopefully that everything I said makes some sense. If not, or if you have any other questions, always ask and leave some comments. Always remember to like and subscribe. Little update on the injury. I got the cast off. Now I got one of these sweet, I don't know what you call them, boots. But at least I can hobble around a little bit. They're still telling me I start the rehab next week. It's going to be weeks before I can drive again. So maybe I might get the sergeant major to take me out and drop me off on the side of the lake somewhere. See if I can get some action. But other than that, I'm just doing the waiting game. So thought this video might be a good idea. At least get something out there, and especially if you guys have questions. And now's the time of year I love trolling at Big Bear Lake. So hit me up on Instagram, and tie lines. Till next time.